Hello, the Indie Council is in session. Welcome. This is a place for the leading voices across the industry to gather and talk news, titles, and everything indie. I'm your master of ceremonies, Janet Garcia, and today we are hanging out. And I honestly, Jill didn't change what she wrote last week, and I was not ready to pivot because I'm like, we are not coming to you via Flock. We're hanging out, and joining the council is the birthday girl, Jenny Windom.
Hey, happy birthday to me, I guess.
Yay!
Actually, I think by the time this episode comes out, it will officially be my birthday. So, yeah,
Nice.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Also, and this is a joke because Jill and Mike just had other things to take care of, but really, to not show up on your birthday, I feel like, do you feel like it's personal?
Yeah, I actually plan on calling them out later publicly on Twitter. This is actually like the pre-call out right now.
Nice.
So get ready, everyone. New era. Wholesome no more. Yeah.
This is our first one-on-one episode.
I know. I'm excited. This is like, because you and Mike have like dark pedestal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to figure out what this is. What are we, Jan?
I feel like, honestly, like I've been so ready for you to ask. Thank you for asking.
Oh my God.
I think we're like the beacon of light, I think. Which honestly, like, I'm not going to lie to you. Jill is much fluffier than me. So like y'all as a pairing should be beacon of light, but she's not here. So I'm going to take, I think beacon of light.
There we go.
Once I dye my hair, that can be a thing we share, but
Oh my gosh, wait, what color are you dyeing it?
I don't know. I think I want to do like a red or a blue, but I'm open to suggestions. And I don't want to do an all over just because I don't want to commit to the money and the wear on the hair. Like, you're like in a different tax bracket that you have your whole head dyed. Like that's just something I can't reach. But I'm going to do that like way down the road of like probably either like a dip dye or like a dyed money piece kind of thing. I'm not sure. Yeah. It'll be like post wedding, post Japan. So in another era of life is when I'm going to do it.
I'm so excited. Yeah. Everyone, you heard it here first. Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you've been telling this to everybody.
You probably heard it here mostly first, I think. Because It's probably true for most content we make on the show. You most likely heard it here kind of first, not really. And with that being said, let's get into indie news. The headliner story today is that publisher Humble Games exists in name only following the layoff of all 36 staff members. So we're going to kind of go big picture with what is the holistic story and then get into the weeds with an article from Aftermath kind of cataloging the whole thing. But for those who don't know, Humble Games is an indie publisher. You might know them from like knowing Humble Bundle, which they're like a subset kind of spin-off from Humble Bundle. So this is not a Humble Bundle story, it's a Humble Games story. So they're an indie game publisher and they have published about 49 titles to date. Games such as Unpacking, Wandersong, Signalis, Cardo, and one of their most recent publishings was Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, which we talked a little bit about last week, I think. And I think Nicole Carpenter of Polygon was either the first one to break the story or like one of the first. It's certainly like where I first saw it on Twitter, where she had tweeted out 36 people were reportedly laid off at Humble Games this morning in what staff are calling a total closure of the publishing company. Devastating news, dozens of people lost their jobs and the industry loses more resources. Now, I really want us to focus on that wording because that's like a big sub-story in this story of her wording of mentioning the staff are calling it closure, because Ziff Davis is calling it a restructuring of nothing because there's no one left to restructure. We'll get more into it. So that's kind of a big angle there. And then another thing I want to get out of the way right away is the projects that are currently under, publishing from Humble Games. Those are going to be taken care of by a third-party company. So they have at least 7 publicly known upcoming games, titles like Billy Bust Up, Breeze in the Clouds, Lost Sky, Monaco 2, Never Alone 2, On Your Tail, and The Wizard of Legend 2. Those should all hopefully be fine and that they're going to be taken care of by like a third-party company. At least that's the plan. And then getting into the details really quick, I want to jump over to an article by Nathan Grayson over at Aftermath. Definitely encourage y'all to read it in its entirety. I'm going to read most of the opening, kind of skip down, and then like cut out the bottom part. But the whole thing is really fantastic. And I think cataloging like the context of what's happening. So the article is Humble Games lays off all employees, carries on in name only. And it reads as follows. Today, Humble Games informed employees of layoffs that will impact the whole company, leaving its staff of 36 jobless. Laid off workers took to LinkedIn to relay what management told them in a morning meeting, which Aftermath has obtained a recording of. In the meeting, Steve Horowitz, president and of parent company Ziff Davis's technology and shopping division, pointed to long delays and rising costs as pervasive issues faced by Humble Games. He went on to say that Ziff Davis had attempted to sell Humble Games twice, but that, quote, neither attempt created a significant demand, and unfortunately, neither attempt created a viable offer or an outcome. As a result, he explained, employees are being let go, and remaining projects will be carried over the finish line by a third-party company called the Powell Group. Quote, we continue to see the cost rise, delays continue, and during the sale process of our attempt to sell over the past couple of months, we've seen an additional millions increase in development expenses coupled with ever-long delays in bringing titles to market, Horowitz told employees. Given all this, we've made a very tough but necessary decision to restructure all of Humble Games with the goal of providing the best cost-effective way to make sure that the games see market, our existing slate sees market, and supporting the developers that are associated with it. As such, we're going to be using a third party to help us manage the slate moving forward, as well as the back catalog. As a result, all roles within Humble Games are going to be impacted. And then kind of skipping down, the article continues. Former employees are incensed by what they perceive to be damage control tactics on Ziff Davis's part. Quote, Ziff is trying to spread the idea that it's a restructuring to save face, but that's a lie. One former Humble Games employee who is granted anonymousness, basically. I never know how to say that word.
Anonymity?
Yes. To avoid potentially voiding a severance agreement, told Aftermath. No one from HG, Humble Games, survived the layoffs, nor will they have anything to do with the game's launches moving forward. Chris Radley, a former Humble Games creative lead who left the company at the end of 2022, spelled things out even more clearly on LinkedIn. Operations have been handed off to a third-party consultancy. No staff are left, Radley wrote. Do not believe this Taylor message written by the parent company of Humble Games, Ziff Davis, who are trying to mitigate pushback. This was once again a failure of leadership across the board. And once again, hardworking, talented staff are paying the cost of their poor decisions. Every ex-employee is being gaslit by this narrative, and it's so disrespectful. And then closing out, no, it's getting kind of long, but I really like this part because it sort of brings out, I think, another facet of this discussion. You know, we've talked about the Ziff Davis acquisition of all these like different publications. So I think this kind of helps contextualize this in the large portfolio. Grayson continues and writes, Humble Games was a publisher spun off from Humble Bundle, a charity-centric storefront that was acquired by IGN in 2017, and which has not been impacted by today's cuts. More recently, IGN purchased the Gamer network of sites, which includes Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, GameIndustry.biz, and VG247 for an undisclosed sum, leading to immediate layoffs and the gutting of Dicebreaker, a beloved board game site. Former Humble employees to whom Aftermath spoke believe that these cuts are less tied to that side of the business and more the end result of a media company failing to understand how to run a video game publisher. Quote, the business models were just incompatible with each other, a former Humble Games employee told Aftermath. Ziff is very good at owning a lot of media and increasing revenue and advertising, and Humble Games publishing was just not something that agreed with their business model. They needed money, they needed it now. They want to see an immediate increase in revenue after investing cash into a business, and unfortunately, that's just not how games work. Another former Humble Games employee told Aftermath, quote, Ziff does not understand the world of game development and the principle that when you invest money, a game is not released in 6 months, but takes time to be done. And we're starting to not like this when they understood its workings. So their stock's going down. They simply decided they did not want to be in that business anymore. Their decision was not rational and will really hurt indie development in the long run, on top of their employees and the project in development. Obviously, this is a crushing story to hear. I think Humble is such, and obviously, like, again, games is different than Bundle, but the name Humble carries such weight in the indie industry. How did you find out this news, and what is your gut reaction to it?
So I found out this news because I'm in a Discord with some other community managers and folks in the industry, and I woke up and they were all saying, like, I just lost my job. And a few of them had only recently picked up work in, I think, within the last year. So it's like this rotating door of work in the industry that we're all very familiar with at this point. But it was just one of those things where I woke up and you log on to social media and you see your friends and your coworkers and peers talking about it already. And it was devastating. I think this is one of those where when I heard about Humble being acquired by Ziff Davis, I think in the back of my mind, as with many other people, I'm sure, there were those thoughts of, okay, what's going to happen to Humble as a whole? What's going to happen to each wing or each arm of Humble? And it's really devastating to see that I think one of the most successful ventures that Humble has taken, which is fostering these really good indie games and curating and collecting all of these titles that are outstanding and very different. This is now not going to be a thing. So it's really sad to see. Again, it's the conversation we keep having, but I'm really saddened by not only the direct impact of like the 36 people who no longer have their jobs, but the ripple effect of this, I think, is a bit more apparent because of how concentrated Humble is, where you not only have the 36 employees, you have all of the teams, the developers that they're working with now in the dark, wondering what's going to happen. This could potentially affect those students. I don't know much about the Powell Group. I look them up and they have a very corporate website, and it looks like they've worked with they have Hyperbeard Games, which I believe is a mobile company. They've got like Ziff Davis on there, Tripwire. They have a bunch of companies, but it feels very corporate and cold. And I think there's this element of, are they going to understand and treat these games with the same level of care and attention that I think having an in-house team would have done? I don't know that answer, but the fact that that's a question is still very worrisome to a development studio who's just trying to make a game and now have to be concerned about this potential partnership. And then there's the fatigue that moves even further back, where you have people on the outside looking in from the industry, seeing yet another example of a corporation not understanding what they signed up for when they acquired this entity, and seeing that the higher ups constantly just look at us as dollars, look at people in the industry as dollars, and then are willing to just sort of pull the rug from underneath folks. And so that feeling of being disposable is just contributing to this, I think, continuous burnout and fatigue that a lot of people in the industry are just feeling in this like underlying current constantly right now. So yeah, it's bad news again. It's just really, really unfortunate. And I wish I could say something that was really hopeful and like, I think we can get out of this. But unfortunately, I think if we do, it's not going to be the corporations that do it. It has to be a grassroots movement that tries to create a different model of game development at this point, because these
Outer
companies aren't going to do
sloth.
it. I know, outer sloth, like genuinely models like that, I think are going to be what ends up contributing to saving this industry, because these companies are cannibalizing us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great way to put it and a great wording for it. It is also so much, there's like so many layers to unpack, I think, with this specifically, because it is tied up to Ziff Davis, which did just have that media acquisition. And I love that, Grayson does the work of, in the Aftermath team in general, talking to other people and like adding that extra contextualization, because they are definitely separate entities, but it is part of, I think, it's a reminder of like what the Ziff Davis model is, which again, it makes sense because it's a seemingly very successful business, and you don't get that way by doing it for the culture. You get that way doing it for the cash. And if the culture benefits, that's good because it makes you look good. Humble is a part of the article that was in here that I didn't read was talking about Humble Games as like a publishing unit. And because it's within Humble Bundle, and Humble Bundle has that charity mindset, the idea of the team, at least from like some people inside the company's perspective, was such a kind of curated space of like, it's not just that you want to be in game publishing or indie game publishing, it's that you really care about the vision of what Humble puts forth in terms of how they look at the community, how they look at almost like game development for the greater good, which I think makes this even more crushing, because it's like this almost idealistic space that was created. And I mean that in the in the vision sense. Obviously, I'm sure they had the
Mhm.
regular problems that anyone else has and trying to like make it work. Because at the end of the day, like if you are selling your video games, like that inherently makes it a business. Like I don't think there is a certain type of studio is free from like the burdens of these things, but I think the care is different. And like the I went to a talk once, like a few months ago with, funny enough, Isaiah's RIT from an RIT alum, and they had like other alumni talk about like their fields and sort of like what they do in their fields and their perspective. And one of the people that spoke was this animator who talked about how like she does all of her work within thinking of like a morality matrix, basically, of putting these different
Mm.
values you have and then kind of stacking them against each other. So talking about like what is our number one thing that we care about, which like for her in her studio was like creating good art and like kind of improving the world. And then it's like, okay, so what things are we willing to like give on and not? It's like we wouldn't do something for, like, her example was a tobacco company, because even though it might give us a lot of money to like make other good things, and that's good because we want these other facets, it goes against our number one thing, which is like the humanity aspect of it. And she kind of talked about like how you manage business and morality. And I think when, we don't know, all of the intricacies of the mindset that goes into like a company like Ziv Davis, but it does feel like it is what's at the top of their like matrix is most likely
Mhm.
fiscal. I would be really, really, really shocked if it wasn't. Which
Yeah.
again, that's not a judgment. Well, I guess it's a little bit of a judgment, but it's an observation at least. Because that's not what I would do with my stuff. But like, hey, that's them and whatever. But then the problem becomes when you have companies that maybe have a different vision, having to operate underneath a company that doesn't share your number one vision. And what does that look like?
Mhm.
And again, places need to make those concessions. Like we see acquisitions happen all the time. And often that is for the hope of maybe stability or, additional resources to be able to continue to make that work. But yeah, it sucks that so much of the world is a toxic nesting doll of capitalism, and like the odds of everything working are so rare, because what are the odds that like 80 companies share the same core vision is
Mhm.
pretty low, I think. And just from by way of different people are different people, right? Like if we got 80 content creators together and we wrote out like why we make content, we'd have a lot in common, but we also have some things that are different. And the idea of
Mhm.
trying to operate all together, someone's gonna have to bend, and it's gonna be the thing that's lower down. And I feel like this is an example of that happening. And I'm so curious, kind of looking forward, will we see, like, what do you think? Are we going to see Humble Games, quote unquote, come back? Kind of there was a company this happened to where they like only have the name left and they like make games. I forgot what studio had that same thing happen. Like, do
Mhm.
you think we'll see it resurface in name only as a indie publisher once again?
I mean, okay. The super cynical part of me is going to say probably yes, partially because Humble Games is a brand that's been established, right? There has been money, time, and energy spent establishing what Humble Games is and what it stands for. They have a back catalog, and they have games that are ostensibly still coming out and still going to be supported. And so I think from a fiscal, I'm trying to think greedy, filthy, money making standpoint.
If I was evil,
If I
what would I
yeah.
do?
But like no, and I mean, I guess again, I don't want to say it's like all evil, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm like, it's not altruistic. So I
Yes.
think from a business standpoint, if you have a brand there that's been established, you probably will want to do something with it. I don't know if this is going to, because I was looking at the Powell Group Consulting website, they do like what did they say? They also support in terms of game, not just game research and viability assessments. They help with game scouting and IP acquisition. So I'm wondering how much of this consulting company is going to play a role in Humble Games. And maybe the quote restructuring is laying off everyone who's been on the team, but they will be giving more of this role to this consulting firm.
Mm.
I'm not sure. This is all speculation on my part, but I would find it very odd for them to just completely like let it go, because
Yeah.
that is feels like a decent amount of money on the table, like not an insignificant sum, but I don't know. Maybe it is for big papas if Davis.
Yeah, I think too, with Humble bundles still existing, that makes me think
Mhm.
that they would want to like create some type of eventual resurrection of it. Because they still do have those titles coming out, and that's also just the stuff we know about too. I'm so curious. Are there companies they were like pursuing prior? And that was kind of also another thing that was in the article that I didn't get to, was
Mm-hmm.
talks about like, hey, I don't really see anything on their calendar for 25 and 26. Like, what does that mean? And I don't know how long also top down. That's the other like kind of dark thing about how these things tend to work. Like top down, this might have been known for a while and not like solidified until this date. So, maybe this is going to be a clean cut after these 7
Mm-hmm.
titles release, which also like 7 feels like a lot of games like to have to like put out, especially in the context of what they already have. Like they only have, at least on their website, like the Humble Games website, 49 titles listed kind of under their belt. And some of those are also not to like take away from the work that they did on it, but some of those are games that maybe were published on one place and got published somewhere else. Like a few of those
Mm-hmm.
are, publisher listed is Humble Games, but also some of them are co-published. So
Right.
it feels like, and that's the other thing that's kind of jarring too. And maybe it's just that as we get older, like the time compresses. It's like how, 2008 wasn't that long ago. It's like, oh, that was a really long time ago. But it feels like Humble Games, like, was just getting started, So it's, yeah, it's just frustrating
Yeah.
to see this happen. But, to the like ex-employees' points that they kind of raised, yeah, it's a big investment to like go into games, and the payoff isn't like super wavy. Like it can be, and I think that's what's so like tempting about the games industry, especially when we had that boom during like the
Mm-hmm.
height of the pandemic. Like I think it's so easy to look at games that are massively successful, like a Pow World, and be like, and if we made 8 Pow Worlds, we'd want to make 8 more. So like you're still kind of doing the same thing, but yeah, like in the odds of that are really rare. It is kind of sinking a lot of money into it, and you kind of have to be, and that's kind of why I go back to, even though arts, if you're selling your art for money, you're inherently practicing business, you're in capitalism. But so often the driving force isn't money, because if you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make a lot of money, there are much easier ways to make money. Like making money in the arts is like the hardest way to make money, which
Yeah.
is like also why I think why so often we speak about the humanities and the arts and game development as a thing that often does come from a place of passion. Because sure, while you are making money off of it and you like maybe make decisions that are based off trying to make money, your ultimate driving force is likely not money. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I don't know. I definitely was surprised by this because again, we don't know Ziff's bottom line and how they want to function as a company, but it just feels like, can't you just let them like, I'm like, let them not make money and just sit there just
I
for like the vibes. I
know.
don't know. That's why I don't own a company that is
Same. I
massively
think
successful.
it's just, I don't know. And at this point, maybe we're going in a circle, but I think this idea of like, I feel like, and I tried to look this up and I couldn't quite find anything, but I didn't get this, sense that Humble Games wasn't profitable. So it's like really frustrating because it's
Yeah.
not that they weren't profitable, it's they weren't profitable enough. And I think that's the part for me that's really frustrating, because it's like, you saw this with also, what is it, like between Take Two and what is it, Roll 7, and like
Yeah.
all of
Another
these.
not closed. No one wants to say they close their studios anymore. This is what I'm
Yeah,
learning from this year.
yeah, it's such an optics sort of trickery, I feel like. But it's this idea that even if you're successful, you still are potentially on the chopping block. That's what's immensely frustrating to me. It's like, you can't just like find success. You have to like blow it out of the
Yeah.
water. And it doesn't escape me, and I don't know where this train will potentially lead, but I think the fact that these are all like single, what is it, isolated stories, single player, shorter form games
Hmm.
versus this games as service, I think is something that I just once again picked up on. Like, these are not titles that are enduring in the sense of like they're not live service games. These are all shorter narrative experiences. And
Yeah.
I think that's another sort of tangential casualty we're seeing in this, is that the devaluing of these very like button down games, at least in terms of like the business side of things, seems to be just occurring again.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I want to mention with a, you know, like it's like weird. I'm like, do I want to like do the formal? The talking point is the restructuring, even though it is with this the entire team being laid off. And this existing, if it does exist further, it will be in a different context with different people. I think the other thing that we lose, besides the stuff that we always talk about and you always mention of, we lose like the knowledge, like these people might not return to the industry, that kind of thing. You also lose connections that were potentially built. So even like studios that already had their games published, or studios where it's like, okay, like you'll get your game published by a third party, like don't worry, like that's all fine. Like they don't have that relationship with their publisher. Like their publisher, it doesn't exist in the way that it existed before. Like maybe it has the same, branding name, but doesn't have the same people. And I think that's also a big detriment, because so much of, indie development isn't self-published and requires, that funding, that support, that belief, that structure. And it's also really hard to, I think, find someone that's, one, willing to publish your game, and two, willing to do it in a business context that you're happy with financially. So the idea that, oh, maybe you had this good thing this one time, it kind of reminds me of, on the editorial side, there's always that conversation of when you write for smaller websites, like archive all your stuff, because like that might not exist anymore. And then you kind of lose all of that portfolio building. And I feel like this kind of has a similar effect just in like the connections and the way that you kind of lose that as well. But is there anything else you want to mention before we hard pivot to Steam festivals, which is like so unrelated?
The whiplash. I don't think so. I don't know. Just if you are following a developer or a publisher or anyone in the game industry that you're just like, I really do value, like I see you doing good work, honestly, just tell them. I think that's like the nicest thing you could do right now to someone, is just let them know that their work isn't going unseen and that they're appreciated, because I think a lot of people right now just don't feel that. So if you have like 5 minutes, just go be nice to someone, I guess. I don't know, something actionable, because it is hard, because a lot of this runs beyond what we immediately can solve. So
yeah. All right, gearing up for festival season. Like, hello. Also, we're not like, and it's not our fault because the news was just dark this week. But the whole like light beacon of light, it's not working out. We're gonna have to pivot to something else.
Just like just harbingers of bad news.
Yeah, maybe it's me. Like, am I the problem? The mic's other dark half. I don't know. But there are some cool festivals, sales, and sort of niche highlights that Steam is putting out, or that's happening on Steam's platform rather, because a lot of these are done in partnership with someone. So the first thing is SimFest. That's happening July 22nd to July 29th. It is a third-party event that's presented by Fireshine Games, Strafon, and Future Friends Games, and it has demo sales and a highlight of new releases within that sim genre. So some examples of a few of the demos we have: building relationships, which is that the one where you're, hold on, I kind of want to look this up now, because is that the building one where you're like,
yes,
the dating sim where you're
like buildings that are dating each other. It looks so fun, and I'm really glad, because I think they had a demo out earlier and I didn't catch it, and I just kind of assumed it wasn't going to be available, and so the fact that it's now here in the SimFest, I'm so excited to play it.
That was one of those where I'm like, I absolutely have to make sure this is the right game, because if not, it's going to sound unhinged. Yeah, I played that.
What are you talking about?
I'm like, the one where the buildings date each other, right? Where it's like, yeah. It also is kind of a platformer, because you kind of like yeet yourself around. It's a funky little game. Yeah. Mythwoods also has a demo. Tranquil Island. Gordlet stood out to me as like that cute little kind of like sim town builder. And Dungeon Clawer, which is like half dungeon crawler, half like claw machine. Like you like pick up like, I think, items or like parts of your inventory, and it kind of has like this 2-layered gameplay structure that seems really cool. So check that out if you're interested. For some sales, some highlights are Cataclysmo, Minami Lane. Shout out to Jill, big fan of Minami Lane. Potion Craft, threw that in there for me. Love Potion Craft. And Capybara Spa, among lots of others. Also, Capybara Spa, super cute. And the capybaras, like, I forgot if you like launch them, they can fall, and they have like little parachutes that pop out of them when they like drift to the ground safely. It's just cute. They're like in little, it's exactly what it sounds like.
Oh my
They're like hanging out in the spa.
That.
They're being friends. Some new releases to highlight from the SimFest as well. Go Town, which seems really fun. It's like a multiplayer kind of light city sim, essentially, with some like other gameplay mechanics thrown in there. You can also, I played the demo at GDC, I think, and there's you can like high five the cows in that game, which is really cool.
That's really cute.
They're like, initially this was a bug and everyone loved it, so we put it in the game, and I love those things. And other cool titles that are recent releases, Rusty's Retirement is highlighted, and so is it Lottle Knots?
I said Lottle Knot.
Yeah, you played that,
really
right?
cute. I loved Lottle Knot. Super relaxing game. You're basically this astronaut that's sent to this planet to clean up all the trash in the ocean, and so it's like you get to just swim around, and there's like bubble sounds, and you just use a little vacuum to suck up trash. It's so nice.
I've been wanting to play that forever. Like every day, I'm like, I think that would heal me. You know, I think that would just
Honestly,
get the equilibrium together.
Yeah.
Other cool things happening is Time Masters Festival, which really I should be all over this because this is like celebrating time manipulation games, and I love
my favorite
time stuff. Me too. This one's presented.
I'm like, give me like a time loop, give me like a cycle, and I am there.
Yeah, your friend, what god was it? The Slay the Princess is like one of the featured images in the background. Super cool.
Yeah.
This one is
Black Tabby Games.
Yeah, hell yeah. This one's presented by Bright Gambit for those interested or curious. And this one ends July 29th. One of the demos that Jill marked down to shout out is Echo Weaver. And there's also sales on games like 1000 Times Resist, which I still need to finish. Which,
oh my God.
Full disclosure, I did the stream for the Steam page thing.
But yeah. Also, we need to talk about 1000 Times Resist. Like, when you finish it, I would love... dream spoiler cast, like we need to just dive in because that game is unreal.
I'd love to.
Also shout out go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to shout out Outer Wilds because I saw it was a part of the sale too, and I was like, oh hey, okay.
Yeah. It's funny because I, at the top of this I mentioned like I love the time stuff, and so do you. Like once I saw there was a time thing, because I went to 1000 Times Resist pretty cold, like I didn't know much about like what this narrative would be. I just knew it was like a story driven game, and getting to the point where like they introduced like the time thing, I'm like, yes, every game is better when you add a time thing. I love time things. So it's our Time Masters, and July 29th. Some other quick sales that are happening from Time Masters is Sucker for Love, Date to Die For, Recall, and Children of the Sun are other cool highlights. And the last thing to shout out is Pix-elated. It's like pixelated, but like playing with the words, that is happening July 29th to August 5th. So it's not like live on Steam yet, but you can check out the like their website proper under braveatnight.co.uk/pixelatedfest. It's celebrating pixel adventure games. So this one is nearly 200 game demos will be available, and it's going to feature games such as Exophobia, Yes Your Grace, Snowfall, Replaced, Fishbowl, 8-Bit Adventures 2, and Die in the Dungeon are some of the ones that'll be featured. So if you are heavy into pixel stuff, check it out. That one's kind of cool because it is so general, because it's just the art. It can really like cut across genres in a way that I think is kind of fun.
Yeah. I like also, just as like an overview of all of these festivals, I do appreciate what Steam is trying to do with having more of these festivals and having them be a bit more specific, because it's a little bit harder to keep track of. Like I think having like the big Steam Fest is really nice, because then you're like all in the sort of the same zone, being like, we got to try demos. But if you pay attention and there's a genre focused one that's like up your alley, like the Time Masters one, it's so nice because it just is just so much less to shift through and like get just like inundate yourself with, because Steam Next Fest now is like what, every time it's over 1,000 demos that you have to try and like massively download, and then you only play like 2 of them anyways because you're so busy. And I think it's nice having these more focused Steam festivals. So kudos to Steam for continuing to at least try some new stuff and expand upon that.
Yeah, and that transitions us really nicely to our topic of the show today, which is how to find your next favorite indie game. We're going to go back and forth on this one and kind of just shout out different tips on how we find the indie games that we end up loving and sometimes following for many, many years. So I'm going to kick it off with check out the credits as my first tip on how to find your next favorite indie. So I think like an obvious check out the credits aspect is like the studio and the publisher, like seeing, obviously for the studio, especially I think in the indie space, one really cool benefit of it, kind of a double-edged sword in a way, but so often indie studios have like a wildly like vast portfolio. Like I think, you know, in the AAA space, it is a lot more common to see like iteration within, you know, it takes so long again to make the game. Like you kind of build within maybe the same
Mhm.
system, the same world, same, like, you know, following like a storyline for many, many games. In the indie space, like I love seeing a studio take wildly different swings in like completely different genres. And I think that really adds value to finding a studio that you like because you can get so much like different stuff just from one studio. And publisher, similar deal. I think while to the untrained eye, a publisher may just seem like they just find games that are generally good and then kind of help get them out. And that is true to a degree, but I do think that different publishers have different eyes for what they want in their catalog, what they think is well rounded, what they think is good. But kind of the deeper cut one that I think people maybe don't always think about is picking something that you love about the game and then finding the person that made that thing. So for me, this has been huge with like artists. Like I'll find an art style that I like and I'll follow that artist and see what
Mm.
games they continue to work on. And same for composers as well. Like Lena Raine's work, I think, is a really good example of someone who is incredibly talented at composition, but also seems to work with projects that, you know, speak to them. And they kind of have like, you know, they
Mhm.
had stuff like, you know, besides like Celeste, but also Chicory, and like those things are, they're very different games, but I like both of those games. Also, Moon Glow Bay was another Lena Raine joint. So, and especially too, like, this is gonna sound kind of like bougie, but like Lena Raine is probably, I don't know Lena Raine's like money, right? But I'm guessing this is a composer that can be a little pickier about the projects that they take on. And I think there's also something to be said there where it's okay, this person's really established in the space. They're picking stuff that speaks to them on some degree. And, you know, sometimes you can even find like cool interviews for different like, you know, composers or sound designers or artists that you can kind of learn more about how they end up picking their projects that can further help, you know, you kind of follow them into the sun and see what they end up getting
Mhm.
up to. So I really love doing that. And I feel like, I don't know, it ends up being this cool like sub lore of you're following just like this person's catalog and their projects. But yeah, like what about you? Have you like found any games that way? Do you also like kind of zoom in when you're picking things?
Mhm. Yeah, I will look at games, particularly like the art style, I think is something that I get really attracted to. There was a person who did, and of course I'm blanking on their name right now, but the person who did the concept art for Citizen Sleeper, oh my gosh, if you can find it really fast. I think it's like Guillaume something something, but
Uh
that per-
Guillaume Sing Elin?
yes.
Probably butchering that, but that is the artist.
Yes, that is the artist. So this is an artist who I've followed, and I've noticed they do concept art for some other projects as well. And so that's just been really cool. I think also composers, because for me, the game music is also really important. Lena's another example. I feel like I really enjoy also looking and seeing who developers enjoy shouting out in
Mm,
the credits. That's something where I'm kind of like, oh, because you can see them shouting out other studios or other developers. And sometimes I'll just look it up just to see what they've worked on, just because I'm like, hey, if they're acquainted, collaborating, they feel like they've helped each other out, maybe I'll vibe with some of their stuff. So I think that's a really great suggestion is checking out the credits.
nice.
Mhm.
What is your first tip about finding your next favorite?
Yeah, so this one is a little bit limited to folks who do like content creation or work within like the games journalism side of things, but PR and influencer outreach is probably one of the ways that I hear about games before they become public. And so for any folks who are listening who are like, "Hey, I'm a content creator. I am in games media or I'm like dipping my toes and I really want to establish myself." Making sure you're signed up for these PR like press lists and these outreach locations, signing up for places like Press Engine, which is a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit dated, but at the same time, everyone still uses it to an extent. Like I still get news from like gamesindustry.biz, Press Engine, and then just having reached out to specific publishers and studios saying, hey, I'd love to keep in touch if you have stuff coming up. And so getting on those lists is what's really allowed me to try and beat the wave of when we have mass announcements happening during things like showcases or festivals, where I can stay on top of it. And again, before the wave of announcements happens, I can like analyze what's interesting to me. Um, I think most of the games, and this is again because I do work with like wholesome games and our wholesome direct, like being able to just see the games ahead of time is just one of the ways that I've been able to do that. So I guess it's not helpful to people who aren't on that side of things, but
Yeah. I
yeah.
think though too, like, and then obviously, you know, do stuff that you're interested in. Like if you're not interested in streaming, then like don't
Oh
stream because
yeah,
then you won't
don't.
have fun with it. But I think too, like you can be a really small creator and still like be on these like it's not, if you're making
Mhm.
content, even if you're just like podcasting for fun and you're like, I have no intention of doing it as a career, like I'm all good, you can still join like those lists. Like I know specifically, I mean, I think a lot of like especially the catch-all things, like things like Press Engine, things like
Mhm.
terminals.io, like a lot of
Yep.
those are just like you can sign up, like anyone could sign up, and then it's up to obviously still like the publisher, the PR person to decide if they're gonna like approve of your key request. But yeah, like I've had friends that stream like just starting out, you know, they have like 3, 5, 7 viewers, which I know for some people is still a lot. Like I'm not trying to discount like that number. And they'll like get codes from like Pop Agenda and like get
Mhm.
to cover it. And like I think too, like I want to shout out like Pop Agenda specifically because I've seen them often also like surface creators that are really small and be like, hey, like this is
Yep.
like when they do their sizzle reels for influencer creator content, they often do feature like really just any of the creators that did something with the code. And I think that's also like really cool and really fun. So yeah,
Mhm.
any if you are doing it at all, even at the hobbyist level, like there is space for you to like get to do that, and there's no harm in putting out requests and like seeing what can happen. You know, worst case scenario, you just like buy the game, which you were gonna do probably anyway. Best case scenario, you get it early and can maybe make content ahead of time, or you know, be part of like a preview cycle. Like there's so many like cool things to do, or even just like keep up with what's coming out. Like those newsletters, like Devolver's creator newsletter, like anyone can sign up and just kind
Mhm.
of hear about what they're working on.
Yeah.
Cool. And then your next one is also on that kind of same vein of
Yeah,
creators.
it is. So, just what I like to do personally is just get on social media and see what people are talking about, which is like pretty straightforward. I think the key to this, though, is finding creators and people on social media who are posting about the types of games that you like. Like, I really am very interested in a lot of like farming sims, cozier games. I really like discovering what's happening in that space. And so I am following creators who I know specialize in that because even though I'm trying to keep my ears on the ground and like seeing what's going on, I definitely will miss stuff because there are thousands of games getting announced and released every day. So I make sure to follow the people who I know are curating the things that I'm most interested in. So if you have a specific interest in horror games, if you're like Mike and you just want like the
I want to
gross
be
scary
like
things,
Mike.
yeah. You can just find the creators who are focusing on the horror games. They're going to be the ones that surface the stuff that is new, that is exciting, and that other folks may not be paying attention or talking about because they are maybe just not tuned into the genre, they don't have the interest, or they don't have the time. Because a lot of creators also just don't have the time to cover everything. And so it's important to, yeah, get a good variety in there as well.
How have you found the influencers that you end up like latching on? Obviously, like part of your job, I feel like is
Yeah.
doing that. But what does that process look like? Like, I think TikTok makes it really easy because they have like the algorithm that can kind of
Hmm.
just throw things at you. But outside of TikTok's goated algorithm, like how would one go about
Yeah.
zoning in on that?
So I really like to, because I have standby games that I know I really love. And so a lot of times when I am just in the mood to just find a different creator, I will like go onto Twitch or YouTube and I will search up the game that I really like to watch. That's like a nostalgic favorite. And then I will try to see if there's anyone new who's been covering that game or talking about it. So like recently I just restarted playing Super Mario RPG just for fun. It's such like a cozy game for me because there's a lot of memories associated with it. So I can watch a creator and start to appreciate like their personality a bit more and not have to just focus on the game. But I also know the game really well. So I'm like, I can tell if we're like vibing on some of the same stuff or if we
Mm.
like agree or disagree on things. And so it's like having that familiar game is like the foundational point of discovering creators is really helpful for me. So that's
It's
what
like
I like
having
to do.
it's like having a control and like an experiment. I've never thought of
Yeah.
doing that. But that's a good idea. Yeah, the closest I've gone to that is like I've looked up like Jack and Daxter before to see like who's
Mhm.
playing it. and like people playing it for the first time, I'm like, I'm that weirdo in the chat that's like can answer all the questions about it, where it's like, where is this? And I'm like, did you try this the back corner over there? Because it's easy to miss. Yeah, that's like a smart thing to do. And like you can also, obviously zero in even further and pick like if you're looking for indie specifically, like an indie favorite that you have. And like chances are like if someone's covering an indie game, like they do indie game coverage generally, because I think it's so easy to not have that be a vertical that most people that are doing even just like a one-off probably will like return and do that again.
Yep.
Yeah, it was it's funny because I like watching the last Wholesome Direct, like I was like really excited to see, is her name Kennedy?
Yes.
Is that like the
Kennedy, Cozy K.
Yeah. When I saw like Cozy K, I was like, oh my gosh, like in a widescreen, like in a horizontal format. That's so weird because I follow her work on TikTok like as one of like my go-to creators as well. So it was like, oh, like I think that was a cool not to just like kiss your ass because you're on the show or whatever, but like I mean I liked Wholesome Direct before I knew you, so I feel like it's okay for me to be like a Wholesome Direct stan. But that was like a fun integration of having like different creators kind of speak about the games. I thought was interesting. But yeah, like speaking of being online, another one of the tips I want to shout out is getting into the weeds of online storefronts. So for me, this is any game that's free. It's like checking out the free game section on any storefront, but also itch.io has been such like a beacon for when I kind of, all indie games are valid, but I think when I kind of graduated to, okay, not just an indie game someone told me about or that I read about, like something that is I haven't heard anyone talk about, that I don't really know about. And honestly, I've played some of my favorite games that way, just going on itch.io. Like there's just incredibly memorable and also really oftentimes short experiences. So I think it's a great place to sort of experiment alongside developers. Like so many people go on itch.io as developers and they're like, hey, this is like a demo of a game. This is like a game jam thing. And like, you never know what you're going to get out of it in terms of what you might be like drawn to. Like that's when I first found, I think it's the creator's name is Lucy Blundell. And I think the studio is like Kameko with a K. Like they made One Night Stand. They made that nostalgic game from last year that I can't remember, Videoverse. And like I first found their work on itch. Like it was on other platforms, but like that's where I like came across it. Like I talk about Yev Oma all the time, that cute 30-minute game of like someone walking with their grandma in the woods. And like it's like when I played like far, and again, like kind of tying back to like the humble stuff, like with Bundle, like Bundle had so many of those titles, or buying even just like bundles of games for charity off any platform and kind of going and digging into that. And if you're not like a PC gamer, because I do think like indie thrives so well on PC because of like how easy it is to put out work and share it. But if you're not a PC gamer and you have any console, you can go like low to high on the storefront. But specifically, I think Nintendo's eShop is currently the best at that. I've done the low to high on PlayStation, and like it's a lot of like shovelware stuff or like whatever. But like low to high on eShop hits. Like I promise you will find some, like whether it's a game that's just always cheap and is cool. Like I remember playing I can barely even recommend this with the name because the name is so weird. Like it's like an escape room game, and it's like $1 or $2 on the eShop. It's like very much the vibe is asset pack. I don't know if it actually is an asset pack game, so sorry if you made the art, but it's like the art is kind of garish, but the design is like really fun. It's like a little escape room, and like the puzzles are really intriguing, and like I played it and loved it, and like I like made Isaiah play it after. I'm like, I think you're really gonna like it. It's like well designed. It's like, yeah, it's really good. Like stuff like that, or games that are just heavily discounted will also come up on that low to high. And again, it's not necessarily exclusively indies, but like many of those titles are indie games. And like, it's so fun. It's like we have Steam Next Fest at home, like vibes, hitting that low to high on the eShop. It has not steered me wrong, and I've gotten a lot of really cool stuff from it.
Yeah. I ended up shifting because I realized like when you talk about storefronts, that's like kind of about Steam as well. And just to talk about Steam, because I think you can get onto Steam and it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of games, there's a lot of different daily deals, things happening, fests happening. So what I really like to do, just to hone it in a little bit for me, is I will just look at upcoming games because that narrows down the window. And I like to just look at whatever's coming up in the next like month or two because I know it's stuff that's relatively actionable. And also my brain can't take more than that as a timeline. So what I like to do is just scroll through, and it's a little bit, I don't know, I kind of enjoy looking sometimes at just
Yeah.
everything that's coming out on Steam, because it's really fascinating to see sort of what is the popular type of game that people are just sort of trying to push out because they're like just getting a little bit of that shovelware kind of feel out. But you discover a lot of really lovely little gems in there every once in a while. And so yeah, just scrolling through popular upcoming or just upcoming games is really helpful for me. And I do that to stay on the loop for other online storefronts.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Your next one is showcases. So you did do, your quick hot swap to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
did.
narrow it in.
So showcases, I mean, we talk a lot about one of the most accessible ones is like Steam Next Fest. You can discover plenty of games through there, through the ways that Steam curates and filters those games. But if you have the ability to find a local or regional festival, I think that's always really exciting, because there's this added benefit of being like, hey, these are like homegrown games. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are games that are from people who are in my area trying to like make this passion of theirs come to fruition. And so like in Portland here, we've got a couple of, like, Rose City Comic Con happens, and we have like the Retro Game Festival, but oftentimes at the same event venue, they'll have little sections with like indie games from developers that are around town. And so it's really cool because these are games that probably are on itch as well, maybe are on Steam, but they're definitely all from here. And so I think if you're in a city or in a town that has the availability to do any kind of like local events like that, check it out. It's always really cool. You get to talk to the devs, and it's just really exciting, because I think when you're at that level perhaps of development, if you're not going to like a PAX or a Bit Summit or a Gamescom, it feels really good to have people come and play your games and be excited about it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a good one for sure.
yeah, and then of course there's the international big events, but you know, that's just if you have the chance and money to go.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always really cool, because that's where a lot of the new stuff is getting announced, and that's where a lot of the new stuff is playable for the first time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think on that note too, I feel like if you're, again, I guess you do need some level of city, like you just need the population to have
Right.
people doing that. But I think even outside, like, you're in such a good spot with like Portland, where it's like there's like the Portlands, the Seattles, like the places that often pop for that. But I think if you're not
Mhm.
at a place that maybe has like a dedicated expo, I would consider looking into what the like local colleges are doing.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times like a university or a small college will have something like, if they have like a game development program, it's like, oh, the senior project, or like the
Mhm.
the end of this semester, like they make it's it's kind of funny because it's like they are just, I mean, they're older because they're in college, but they're still kids in my mind, so it's like the college kids showing off their first game, and like the professors there, like, I told them that this was going to be hard to make. And it's like there's something really fun about that. Like I got to do that to a degree with I'm MomoCon. MomoCon had like a student game section, and that had like that vibe, which was really cool. And again, like to your point, some of those will be on itch, but yeah, just getting to like check it out in real life and talk to them. And it's also a more low-key setting than something like you at a PAX, and it's like people are making content, and there's press, and there's like these huge
Right.
lines. It's like this is like a casual afternoon
Mhm.
kind of thing. For our last one, both of us kind of want to shout out to varying degrees recommendations. What do you envision when you think of recommendations?
Honestly, I was thinking of just like when my friends, or when folks like you and Jill and Mike are like, oh my gosh, okay, Jenny, this is like, I thought of you as soon as I saw this game.
Mm-hmm.
You have to check it out. I think, especially because we're so inundated with a lot of different places trying to get us to like try a demo, buy a game, wish list a thing. Sometimes I do get a little bit overwhelmed, and it goes a really long way to have friends who are also excited about games, who see things and are like, I think you may want to check this out. And that bumps it up for me in terms of like how much I do want to check it out. But also it's nice because I think all of these people who are recommending games, they're also in just places that I am not. And so you're probably hearing about things that I don't. And it's just, again, kind of a nice, easy way to just stay connected with other people too.
Yeah, that's the original, like the
Yeah.
grassroots how to find new games, just asking people. I think on that note too, finding, besides just like the influencer kind of content creator route, but also just like
Mhm.
even just like traditional media, or just like people that you follow online, where you find that person that you connect with and you're like, I feel like I always like the games I recommend. Like for me, that person is Nicole Carpenter of Polygon, who like I mentioned towards the top of the show. Like every time she writes about an indie game, like I've liked those games. Like, you know, she like is the one that put me on to like I think it's Tiny Lands, the little like spot the difference game. And she also like mentioned Hidden Folks as well. I don't know if I had played it before she mentioned it, but that was like another one she shouted out. And it's like I feel like it's like you have to, if you're lucky, if you can find like your favorite content creators, like content creator, where I'm like, oh, I'll play a game and people think I'm cool. I just get my stuff from Nicole. Like I just copy paste Nicole's like taste and I'm like, this is my taste now. But yeah, I think that, you know, finding people that you have like that through line with is really key. And also I think to a degree, because Steam is kind of questionable sometimes with how they're like, you played this game, you'll like this other game. I'm like, these are very different games. I don't know why you connected it, but sometimes it does hit. Like sometimes they will say, oh, like people, you know, this game is like potion craft or whatever, and it actually is. So I think also to a degree being open to storefront creation too is kind of like a nice other layer to it. You know, reviews, like video game trackers too can have like things like that. I'm using Backlogged right now and just getting to see what my friends are playing and be like, okay, yeah, like, okay, this is what they reviewed it, and kind of get a kick out of that is a good way to go too. But yeah, let us know what y'all's route to finding your favorite indies are. But I think these 6 is like are basically the recipe. I think this kind of encompasses, you know, the credits, the PR outreach, social media content creators, online storefronts, showcases, and recommendations. I think is the holy grail of how to find it. We cracked the code. Look at that.
Did it.
Discoverability is no longer a problem.
What do we solve
solved
next?
it. Yeah, let us know how we can help. But let's get into what we've been playing. I can't help but notice that you have click holding on here again. Did you restart it?
I couldn't remember. And I was like, I realized I spelled it clock holding. Sequel. No, so I didn't play it again, but I couldn't remember for the life of me if I had talked about it or if it was like kind of a dream.
A fever
I don't
dream,
know.
yeah.
Like the game itself was a bit of a fever dream, so I put it just in case. But I think you're right. I did talk about it last week, so I would love to hear what you think because
yeah. It's funny. I read this on your what you've been playing, and I'm like, oh, you must have like gotten into the weed. We were like, I'm studying the code of the game. You went back in and just started like, you know, becoming like a click holding sicko, which I was going to be all for. I was excited to hear like you walking into the source code like it's tunic. People have been buying those. Like Zalavir's tweeted out like people are buying clickers, and like I want them to make an official like click holding clicker. So yeah, click holding it's funny because it's only a 30 to 40 minute game, but I'm not done with it yet. I'm like towards the end. Again, I will also be pretty vague, just because the point of the game is like to experience it. So I won't say too much more than what you said last week, but yeah, you're trying to get to this 10,000 clicks. I'm playing on Steam Deck, which is interesting because I'm like, is it going to work on Steam Deck? Yeah. The controls are like WASD, D, interact, and like, you know, the mouse, like clicking. On Steam Deck, it's the trackpad and you just touch it and hold it, or you can use the back right trigger to click.
Oh, okay.
And then you move still with the joystick, which I was a little surprised, but I mean, you can also remap all this. It's the Steam Deck, but I'm lazy. So I'm like, whatever they tell me it is, like, I'm just gonna do it that way. So it's just joystick to move around, but it's like the tanky kind of movement. Yeah, I'm digging it so far. I'm excited to see like what other, because I'm like right about to get to like the juice, like the real juice of it.
How many clicks are you at?
I'm at like 7,000 clicks.
Oh damn. Okay. Cool.
So I feel like I'm right at which is kind of nice because I stopped I think at the perfect spot where it's like, okay, we're allegedly 3,000 clicks away from that 7 plus 3 is 10. Yes, 3,000 clicks away from the end, maybe. I have no idea. Yeah, it is cool. I honestly feel like this game feels like reading a good short story, but with more breaks in between, because the sort of structure of it is you're clicking. There's this guy there who's like, click it for me, you know, and you're just like, all right. And there's like gaps of silence in between the dialogue, and sort of at least initial gameplay is very much you clicking, you hear from this creep for a little bit, sometimes he'll like ask you to do something. He'll be like, you know, still stay in that corner real quick. He's actually doesn't sound like that. He sound in my head, that's what he sounds like. But the voice is like, it's like a effed up Animal Crossing kind of, but it's like creepy sounding. It's like a.
I want the Janet Garcia voice mod for it.
Oh yeah, because like I hear it's like, yeah, slower, yeah, right there. As he like leans back, and this is straight up what the game is. So I will say, to your point last week, it is not a scary game, though I am kind of waiting for like. There's been so many moments where I'm like, they're gonna put like a jump scare or something here, and they haven't, and I'm like, oh okay, but like it is a unsettling game, and if the thought of like having this creep be like, now click it fast, like if you don't want to read that, then you're probably not going to want to play the game. But if you're willing to be uncomfortable, I think it is really beautifully written, and it's I like the just like kind of the world building of it. And I imagine it'd be interesting to talk to like Zalavir and the team and like kind of the inspo and all that, but like as a player, like just getting into it, it feels like very much like a fun creative challenge of how can I get the most out of this room? And I think it does a great job at playing with how people play games. Like when I first like picked up the game, I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk around and try to like interact with anything I can interact with. And I like turned the TV on. And then like a little bit later, he's like, turn that TV off. I was like, oh, how do you know? How do you know I turned it on? I mean, it's a game, so obviously like they have it coded in there. But then later he's like, turn it on. I'm like, he doesn't know what he wants, you know? But it, without, even though there's not much to spoil at this point, because I'm still not at the big, like some of the bigger stuff, I think. But it does have you like walk around and like interact with a couple things in the room, but it's kind of fun because that's also what I'm doing like as a player. Like when I'm just clicking and he's not saying anything, I'm like, let's see what's like, what's with these paintings in this kind of like in a motel kind of room. And then like later he like mentions one of the paintings to you, and I'm like, yeah, I was looking at that painting. I was thinking about that before you started creeping me out about the painting. But so I think it's really cool in that while it is very much just like it's a game where you're clicking, there is it like narratively leans into having you experience the entirety of what the room is and like what the experience is. And then I think the rollout of learning more about this man is really fascinating because you start with like nothing and you don't necessarily get much like exposition, but through like these little lines, you're like, okay, so like what's up with this guy? Why is he doing that? And I'm not gonna say that you know why, because it's like, he's a weird man. Like I'm not sure, but you kind of get a little bit more into like who is this man and like what's his personality like? What was his life like before this? What's his life like outside of this? And you kind of get little hints at that aspect that I think is cool. But yeah, I really just feel like something that would be in a horror anthology and you'd be reading like a little short story on it. And maybe if this was a book, instead of having downtime between clicking and him talking, you'd have like a lot of empty like pages that have like text here and there to kind of build that suspense. But yeah, I'm liking it. I'm not like completely head over heels yet. I think I'll do a check-in once I'm done clicking. But I am like, this is a really cool experience, and like the story is really interesting. And I also just get a kick out of games that are like taking a very specific genre and being like, what can we do with this mechanic? Like clicker games have existed for like a million years, and this is like a really different kind of spin on it. And yeah, it's cool. I also just like the style of game where it's like one of my favorite games that I played a long time ago, also on itch, was Far From Noise, which like, you're just sitting on like in a car on like the edge of a cliff, and you're just like talking to like a deer, I think, or like God, I don't know. It's like a mix.
Yeah, because it's like when you're like teetering, right? Yeah, I
and that's
love
the whole
that game.
And that game is like awesome. Another game I really love is I forget the name of it. Three Fourths Home, where you're just driving a car. I'll double check the name of it when you like and check back in on it. But it's is it 3/4 home? I'm gonna have to write out fourths the whole way. Yeah. This is a game where you're driving a car like on your way home, and it's like kind of like a tornado warning vibe, or like the weather's not good, and you're like talking. I think you might be like on the phone, or you're like on the phone with your mom and you're like heading home or something like that is the conceit of the game. And the entire game is just you like moving in the car or like walking by the bus stop. Like mechanically there's like nothing happening in the game, but the story is like really well written and really interesting, and like I still really recommend that game because I think it's really, really cool. Click holding feels like it's in that genre. Like if you are a story boy, this is a title that you are going to want to check out because I think it's immensely fascinating. But if that's not your kind of game, I'm guessing that you'll just be like, I don't know, I clicked and he said some things. And I'm like, yeah, but like what he said was really interesting. So that's the game. I'm enjoying it a lot. But what else have you been getting into?
Yeah. I played more Flock. So we played it all as a
Hell
crew
yeah.
last week. I am really enamored with this game.
Me too.
I think my appreciation of it has grown the more I played, and it's kind of interesting because I wasn't I knew it was going to be a solid game. Like I knew like we'd have fun with it, but I think the more I play, the more I appreciate how polished and compact it is, and what it chooses to do it does so beautifully. I think this idea of being able to fly around feeling free, it's just, I was able to play it with my partner Sam, and we don't play games together, we have very different tastes, but we were both able to enjoy this and like able to do our own thing, but then come together and like share in sort of what we discovered and then kind of like peace out again, and it was so relaxing to do. And I think just being in a game that has nature sounds is also, I think it's highly underrated, just having games that are just they sound like you're outside in a very nice way. And I think the size and the scope is really great because I love Pokemon, but I am one of the old Pokemon boomers, I guess, because I can really only remember the original 151, and beyond that, I'm sorry. There's like sporadic knowledge. And so the fact that we only have, these smaller
Hmm.
families of flocks to create and cultivate and like research, I can actually keep track of them. I know what I'm looking for. I'm not getting lost. It's awesome. So, and it's colorful and happy. I can't be sad when playing it. At worst, I'm kind of just contemplative. And I think
Hmm.
that's a really great feeling to have, especially because, I'm currently playing it to just like not think about real world things. So
Nice.
it's really good. So yeah, I continue to recommend it past our playing it together last week.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get back to it. It's so like deceptively good, which sounds like a little insulting, but it's just like
I
on its face, it
know.
just seems like, oh yeah, cool. But it's like the kind of game that I think it's very easy for this to be like my whole personality for no reason. I think it is that classic. The
Mhm.
thing that I always go back to is there's those like 7 out of 10s that you like a 10 out of 10. And this, I'm not saying this
Yeah.
is a 7, maybe it's an 8. Like it's kind of somewhere in that kind of range if I were
Hmm.
to score it. But like it's so wonderful though. Like it's
Yeah.
something that like, and I think that's where it's so important to have like longer conversations and not just be like, here's the bucket I put the game in. Like that tells you some of the story, but not all of it. And I think Flock
Hmm.
is a game that is just so good at what it does. I can't wait to get back and finish it too. It's just, yeah, it's just a nice time.
Yeah.
And then
It's
as a hard pivot, you have 9 souls on here.
I contain multitudes. Yeah, I haven't gotten too much further because I've been playing a little bit more Flock, but I've been slowly plugging away at Nine Souls. Um, I am just okay for folks who aren't familiar with Nine Souls. This is done by Red Candle Games, and what I think is incredibly fascinating is Red Candle Games is known for being in the horror genre, and it's primarily horror narrative, like more in the adventure sort of walking sort of vein. Detention, I think, was their first title, if I'm remembering correctly, and that was like a 2D sort of adventure game where you walked around, you talked to characters, you interacted with things. I am forgetting the name of their next game, but that one was still more of a walking sim,
A
but you had
devotion.
devotion, thank you, but that was 3D, and so they expanded, moving from 2D to 3D. They still had a horror story. Nine Souls is a really interesting pivot because they have now kept within the realm of horror genre, but have explored the mechanics of like a Metroidvania. And I would say Sekiro like combat, where your focus is on parrying and on dodging. And it's really just cool to see a team do these three different things across their three different games and do it really, really well. I also come from a background where I like challenging games. I like playing games that force me to try again and practice. I'm not really good at them, and so there is a lot of trying again in practice, but I like games that force and like kind of instill a sense of persistence and determination in me. And what's really cool is I have never been into games like Sekiro because I've never gotten the hang. Like the timing of the parrying has just been so elusive to me. I've never felt like I could be determined or persistent in a game like that. But Nine Souls has made it so friendly for people who don't know how to parry me, who don't really dodge me, and I feel like I'm finding success. And so I think for anyone who's maybe seen some of the promo and they're like, "Ooh, I'm not really into like dodging and parrying. I don't think
Don't
that
give me
combat's for
hope.
me."
Don't give me
I
hope.
truly think this could be it. Cuz I have it's weird because I feel like I have rhythm, but when it comes to figuring out the timing for
Mhm.
certain mechanics like that, it just never happens. But it's taken some work. Like I think in Nine Souls there are moments where they have waves of combat that I think are a little bit long, maybe a little bit too hard compared to what they lead you up with, but for the
Sure.
most part I felt like so far it's been really balanced and really fair, and any mistakes I've made for the most part have been ones that I could tell that I was making as I was making them. So I feel like it's really good, and the story is like it's one of vengeance and revenge, and I think it's really interesting that they bring in sort of this philosophy, it's like Taoist philosophy mixed
Mhm.
in with sort of this gritty cyberpunk and horror, and I don't know exactly what's happening in terms of like what's going to happen at the end. I just know we're like trying to seek out revenge from people who used to be our friends, and so I'm like trying to figure
So is
out
this like
what
Kill Bill,
happened.
basically?
Yeah, it actually is kind of, it's like Kill Bill, but with like a little furry fox. I don't know what you are. I think you're like a fox.
I thought you
So
were a fox, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you're like a white fox with like this robe. So yeah, you basically are Fox Kill Bill.
Wow. Okay, that's oh man, what a good pick. It's even the robe is yellow too.
Yeah,
So
right. And there is like gore from the jump. So if you're not into like the 2D gore, probably not for you. But I found like it's incredibly stylized, so I thought it was fine, and I think it's been really good so far. So I hope it
how
holds up.
lost are you getting? Because the Metroidvania. So like, what's that
Mm,
vibe like?
Actually, that is another good point of feedback. I feel like, again, I don't know how far I am. I don't feel like I've gotten super lost yet, but there isn't a lot of signaling on where you should go. And so right now it's okay because I feel like I'm early enough that there's not
Mm,
really like I haven't
there's
been to a
no
lot of
wrong way.
places.
Yeah.
There's no wrong way, but I think it'll be interesting when I've unlocked more areas because I have a feeling if they don't give us any more guidance than they are at right now, I probably will start getting a little bit lost. And so I'm hoping that's going to be alleviated somehow. So I'll report back on that. But for now, I'm early enough in that I haven't felt too lost yet.
Sweet. And then you have
Hmm.
a little to the left, seeing star. Is this a
Yeah.
little to the left, but you go to space? Like, what is the
Yeah, I
the
think it's just
DLC?
like the theme of the DLC is like stars. I think I'm not all the way through. I'm doing the thing where I'm trying to get all the stars of the puzzle. So like a
Yeah.
little to the left for folks who aren't familiar is an organizational game. So every level is a different um puzzle, and the puzzle is based on you organizing objects in a pleasing manner, and many of these puzzles have multiple solutions. So let's say you have like a bunch of different types of spoons. You can organize them by the height of the spoon, the spoon bowl size. You can organize them by colors. So there's like a variety of answers. And if you also have your own personal solution or you just want to skip, you can just like say, hey, this counts for me. I'm going to move on. So the devs also allow for personal interpretation. This DLC is just expanding upon it. All of the puzzles they had in the original. I feel like these puzzles are more, I don't want to say like complex in the sense of what you're supposed to do in terms of
Hmm.
you need to organize stuff, but I think seeing some of the similarities is a little bit more difficult. And I think in some places that feels really good because it feels like I'm having to be more observant, and in some places it's a little bit obtuse, but it may just be my brain.
Mm.
So I think for folks who loved A Little to the Left, who wanted more, I do think this is something to check out. Just know that many of these puzzles are more complex. So just be prepared to like spend a bit more time. Cause I barreled through the first game in just a few hours and I was like, good, more, more, more. And this one, I'm like taking my time. So but I'm
Yeah,
finding it satisfying.
that's interesting. It sounds like I was glancing at the Steam page for it, because the reviews for the DLC, specifically Little to Left Seeing Stars, are mixed, and I'm like, well, and Steam is so funny because whenever it's like mixed or negative, I always have to like actually read it, because sometimes it's like someone's being really toxic or cheap, which is just financial toxicity, being aggressively cheap. But this seems like it is people having like a genuinely mixed response to it, where it seems like some people have, said that it's too tedious, or it's too, obtuse, or like it's harder, but not in a way that feels like it's, an improvement. That being said, again, it's mixed. So some people are really enjoying it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like, more of the game, it's worth it, like it has good stuff. But yeah, it does seem like your critique, you are not alone, and you're a voice of the people. But like
it's good to hear.
But like nicer sounding, because like the people will just write anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh man,
I don't know. And I think I mean, if I were to be like, I think I err more on the side of enjoying it, because I think I just did go through the first one so fast. It's really nice to like kind of sit and have to think, but again, I'm finding myself playing like one level and then just like doing something else. Whereas with the first game, I was able to kind of binge it. So maybe it's just also different. It's in expectations from that, what was set up in the first game.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you're just smarter than everybody, You're like, oh, some people don't want to think. Okay. I've been wanting to play a Little to the Left is another game that I think would heal me. And like, I want to play those games. So I need to have like, and I'm redoing my whole schedule, like for my life. I'm like going back inside. It's funny. I commented on your TikTok about your planner, your Hobonichi, and I'm like, I miss my Hobonichi. I started bullet journaling, and the paper's ugly. Moleskine doesn't know how to make paper. I'm sorry. Anyway, but I'm like redoing my whole life, and I should add like a healing hour where I play like a game that's healing, because like I want to play these games so bad, but
I
have so many other games.
Little to the left. Yeah.
That sounds so good though. Oh, no shade to everything else, but like it just seems like it'd be a good time. So I don't know. I hope everyone out there listening is finding time to, pursue their healing hour. Even if it is like something messed up looking, like Mike going into someone's mouth washing, right? Is that the game? Is that game out yet, by the way?
I don't think
this is like my most anticipated game to hear about from Mike of the year, if that's a category. Coming soon. I can't wait. Wrong Organ. Take your time. Which of course that would be the name of the studio, Wrong Organ, but
oh my gosh, that's so good.
I can't wait to hear about that game. Anything else that you want to touch on before we close out and do our like end of church kind of like go now, peace be with you? I was raised Catholic. Peace be with you. Yeah. Go into the Lord of our games.
I don't know.
It's all good.
Yeah. I don't think so. I'm honestly just, the day that I am most looking forward to is August 5th with Fields of Mystria. That is like maybe my currently most anticipated game.
Hell yeah.
I think. So with Fields of Mystria coming, I'm so excited to be able to talk about that soon. Yeah, it's early access, and I don't like early access. I usually, as a rule, stay away. Yeah. But for Fields of Mystria, I'm going to go in, and I'm going to do it. I'm very pumped.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to hear back on how this... I don't know if I want to go in for the early access or if I want to wait. But I want to be part of every, the vibes or whatever. Yeah. I'll probably go just for the sake of... I know Sarah, who's working on the game, so I don't know. Maybe I'll keep my opinions to myself for that reason, but the cows look really good in that game.
They do.
So... It's gonna be a fun one. But until then, that's it for this week's council. I want to say just like go now in peace. Like I'm just in the church mindset. Thanks everyone for we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The Indie Council has its own socials as well. We are at Indie Council _ on Twitter because someone took the actual handle I wanted, and we are at the Indie Council everywhere else because no one took the handle I wanted on those platforms. This session is closed. Go play some indies.